Good afternoon, everyone. It's great to be here. And I don't know about you. I've learned a lot, lots and lots, and it's raised more questions than answers. But I think we can all agree that we are moving in the right direction. Thank you for the introduction. Yeah, I'm a physician scientist with Trinity Hospital Research Institute of Manitoba and senior professor in the Department of Pediatrics and Child Health. What we do is to look at, one of the things that we do is to look at methods behind clinical trials. So as we know, it's never a one-man show. We collaborated with a few people to look at, as you can see here, to look at this review, which I'm happy to share the results with you. And some of the authors are here and have spoken. So which makes my work easier because half of my presentation has been spoken about. So, and I think that's is useful anyway. So, I think I was discussing with Martin just briefly that the discussion about Bayesian and frequentist, I don't think that is going to end in a while. It's going to take continue and continue and continue. Yes, I know this conference is about APT, but what we can all agree on is that at one point do you consider using Bayesian on that platform? I think I remember someone mentioning that it appears that the Bayesian is a bit cumbersome in some situation. And that's, of course, we know the frequentist has limitations. We are not oblivious of that. And the Bayesian also got, I mean, there are reports about the limitations are associated with Bayesian approach. So that still leaves us with that question, when do I use Bayesian on the APT or frequentist? Anyway, I'm not going to answer that question. But what I just want to do is that we dipped into literature to see what is happening in childhood research, childhood randomized controlled trial to see, is there a paradigm shift? Are people still rigid about using frequentists all the time? Or are we having a shift towards Bayesian? We have a few questions that, sorry, I think I want to just go to the research question now, that pop up in our minds that as the inferential statistical framework in child health changed. Is there clustering around p-value of significance in RCT in child health research papers? We all know that some studies have ended, sorry, I tend to move when I'm talking about, some studies have ended up under the desk or have been trashed by just looking at the p-value, okay? And that's one of the things associated with the frequentist. We can't deny that. So that's one other thing that came up. Is Bayesian method a good alternative? We all agree that it's an alternative to performing randomized control trial. Or is it better? I don't think I can answer that question. I don't know whether Anna or anyone here can answer that question as well. So these are some of the things that came into our, and we felt the best way to perhaps look into this is to explore published papers to see what is the direction, what are the papers saying. We are all experts here. We have opinions. Our opinions may be skewed to one side, but the papers, data can't lie. It is what it is. So we wanted to check and I'm happy to share that. So I'm just going to skip, like I said, I'm going to skip all talking about Bayesian. We've had so many things. John spoke about it, Anna spoke about it, the prior distribution, Dirichlet, the last speaker also spoke about that. So I'm just not going to bore us about that anymore. I'm sure we've had more than enough. I'm just going to go straight to what we found in the review that we did, if that is okay with you. So the objective was we investigated the extent, if any, to which inferential statistical framework in child health research has changed over 10 years. And then we wanted to find out if there is actually a clustering around p-value of significance in child research papers. So we went all through this. So what we did was we dived into Cochrane, sample 600 RCTs. And we leverage a study that started in Alberta that's been ongoing, looking at, that's the ARCH group, looking at random sampling of RCTs in Cochrane, looking at different areas of RCT methods, be it bias, reporting. So we just leverage that to sample 600 full text RCT. We were just curious. We wanted to be able to answer. And then we set no restriction, just as many studies that are published, were published in English and were RCT in design. That was what we looked at, so that we are not restricting ourselves. We want to know what is there in literature. So, so we designed extraction, did a very robust back and forth discussion with the meta research at Stanford, just to be sure that we actually captured what we need to look at in those papers. And so we did our data analysis, and it's also part of this study. So what did we find? The first thing that we found was that most of the studies, as expected, were from Europe and then North America. We wanted to see what is the characteristics of the RCT. What do they look like? Most of the studies were from North America and Europe. That wasn't news to us, as expected. Then we went further to see, because we sampled 2 years, in 2007 and 2017, we wanted to see over that 10-year period, what does it look like? So what we did was we did both. We approached it using the frequentist approach. We also used the Bayesian approach. We use both approaches to do the analysis, so that we see what is literature saying. And as you can see here as well, sorry. Yeah, is the pointer working? Okay, great. So as we can see here, the total study, you see that we have more study from North America, and also from, it's difficult to see from this angle, from Europe. Okay, so now, as I mentioned earlier, but the shift between 2007, we wanted to see what is the direction, what is happening, over this 10-year period. So let me go to the next slide. That will give us. So, okay, we go back a bit. We had more studies from Europe and North America, but the increase we're seeing, you can see what is happening in Asia, which I think is a good thing, that we are having more RCTs coming from that continent. And also we saw an increase in African continent. So we did try to use, like the earlier presenter mentioned, we used the Dirichlet non-informative prior, because that is a simple way of determining prior in using the Bayesian here. And we wanted to see what is the posterior probability of that increase. How true is that increase? How true it is? And as you can see here, for Africa, it's like 0.91. And for Asia, it's almost completely true. This is what, so I don't know whether having that extra layer of information to demonstrate how true the increase that you see provided by the posterior probability is an added advantage to wanting to use Bayesian. I leave that judgment to you. Now, like I said, we just pick a few trial characteristics. Another one here was to see by distribution of RCT by year of publication. So we looked, okay, no, let's go to the next one. No, I want to go to a very more interesting RCT type by year, no. Okay, by control type. Yeah. We also looked at this to see, depending on the control type, what does the data look like? The whole essence, the point of all this data that we have here, not to bore you, is that from the frequentist perspective, we can see by highballing, we can see the increase. But to add that extra layer of how true that increase is, by Bayesian analysis, we were able to see that using the posterior probability distribution. I think that is the whole wrap-up of all these characteristics of the RCT that we looked at. So, okay, so this is also about RCT characteristics. I'm not going to bore us about that. RCT characteristics, interim RCT characteristics as well. The same thing, that is all what we have here. Here you will see, let me point another attention to this again. In this situation, we are looking at primary outcome analysis of RCT by year of publication. We saw here we have 410 that reported p-value only, okay? So I think I should back up a little. When we were designing the extraction, we consider all the elements that you will see in a Bayesian RCT. Was a prior distribution mentioned in the paper? Was posterior distribution mentioned in the paper? Was there consideration for this also in the data analysis, in the hypothesis testing? Those were part of the things that we set out to, that we extracted in the, in the RCT that we looked at, both the statistical approach and also in the characteristics of the RCT. So the similar thing here, that's why I'm saying that I don't want to waste our time on this, is that whatever increase we saw using frequencies, we were able to determine using posterior probability to what extent is that increase or decrease. So I'm just going to move to the next. So this is the more interesting part. Type of statistical framework in those 600 RCT. Of the 600 RCT we looked at, 89% used frequentist and 11% used the Bayesian approach. That sends a message that it appears we still have more people doing frequentist in RCT. Two, even within this 11% of the 600 RCT that we looked at, let me split this data further. Over that 10-year period, if you look at it, the Bayesian and the frequentist moved from 91 to 87, not so much difference. The Bayesian from 9 to 13, that was encouraging. Okay, that perhaps we are waking up to the alternative approach to performing RCT. That's actually answer one of the questions we wanted to see in the RCTs published over this year, this 10-year period. So these are just the number that's now within each year. What did we see? In 207, you can see that the direction is the same. You have Bayesian statistics is low compared to the Bayesian with frequencies is lower compared to the frequencies. The same thing also here in 2017. When we look at the clustering around the p-value, I think this is the most interesting of all we did. We looked at the different statistical significance used in the 600 papers. This is what we found. As you can see, okay, let me go to this. The next slide is a bit better presented. Yeah. You can see we had over 437 studies reported statistical significance as 0.05. And that leads us to that question. Is there a p-hacking in here, going on here, in here? And this is a food for thought that I know we are talking about APT, but is it time for us to give Bayesian approach more consideration as we design our adaptive platform trial? Is it time for us to continue to look at this? Because this shows us that there is something going on. We can't explain it, but this is what the data is showing. So that is one thing that I feel we need to bring up in this meeting today. I'll leave that thought to you. And then when we looked at between the years, sorry, it's very difficult for me to see from this angle. So from, if we look at between frequentists and those that's still the same thing, sorry. Yeah, the number of studies that use frequentists is 535, and then the number that used is 65, just to split, to give you a additional layer of the number of studies, not just the percentage now. Yeah, one other thing we wanted to check was to see if there was any factor within any characteristics of the trial that could predict trialists using Bayesian or frequentists. And to surprise you, we couldn't find any. We could not find any of the trial characteristics that could predict whether a trialist will use Bayesian or frequentists. So that summarizes what we found in the paper. These are some of the references we use. Thank you. I'll just take your question.